because the last time this debate was held, I guess 2 years ago, I remember there was quite a bit of discussion about keeping, and I've heard it tonight as well, keeping Mountain View kind of user-friendly, not like Santa Cruz, where the bumper stickers say, keep Santa Cruz weird. We're not interested in keeping the place weird, but keeping it user-friendly. And as I recall some of the candidates, I asked them, how big should Mountain View get? And they had a number. And the number I remember was 75,000. That was one of the candidates suggested that was what we should max out at. Well, according to what I read last year, we were already at more than 72,000. So I suspect that by now we're very close to 75,000. So my question is, do we still want to set a limit? And how would we hold to it anyhow? What sort of policies would say, no, wait a minute, we've got 78.4 thousand people here, and that's it. Before you can move in, somebody else has to move out. Jack?
Yeah, we're updating the general plan right now, and that's for the next 20 years. And when you talk about a population growth of the city, this is what's going to basically kind of control that. And the way it's calculated is that you take all of the units that are possibly allowable to be built. That is, how many 4 stories, how many units per acre, and you can do a simple arithmetic calculation. Based on the last one that I saw of the general plan as it is, we would max out at around 96 to 98,000 people. That doesn't mean we'll grow to that. It means that the potential is there to grow to that. The important thing is the quality of what you put in, not just the quantity. You know, in my past 4 or 5 years, I've worked with people all over the city. Everybody loves their neighborhood. It's just amazing. Everybody does, no matter where you go. And this is a big consideration for me. So I really think it's critical that we listen to people and see what they want. We have to be aware of the whole Bay Area, and we have to do our part. But as Dan said, we have already done our part to a great extent. We have 58% apartment renters in the city, and that's a lot. And so we've done our part. Our density can go up some more in certain places, but it's critical that it be done correctly. So I just really think it's so critical. Zoning, not rezoning. It's really a shame when you buy a house and you know what the zoning is, and suddenly it gets put up by a factor of 3 or 4 right next to you. That's really kind of unfair without the mitigating pieces to put in place to not affect everybody badly, which is what was done at Prometheus.
But that sounds reassuring, but of course that assumes that Jack Siegel's always on the council.
Right.
You know, there might be somebody else 10 years down,
right.
10 years down the road, they might have different ideas, and then they rezone. I mean, yes.
And I think the general plan update, as Jack mentioned, is doing that. We've gone out to the community and asked the community, well, what would you like? And most people say they like their neighborhoods the way they are, but there are areas that we could redevelop. And what we're trying to do is allow for that flexibility to redevelop. We are probably going to grow. I don't know what the magic number is. I've seen other communities down south who have put limits by putting moratoriums on how many houses they can build in a year. And frankly, I've been visited them, and I see their downtowns are struggling. The community is struggling in other ways. So I don't think it's really a wise choice to put a limit. I think we have to go with what the market says to some extent, but make sure that the way we grow is done in a balanced way and an equitable way, and what our community is comfortable with.
It might be tough to resist the siren call of growth, because that brings money in, that increases services. Gentlemen at the
something else that hasn't really been talked much as far as is another thing that can happen really related to growth is, I could see Mountain View having, a few to several thousand more people. I don't know if I'd want to live in a Mountain View of 100,000 people. I think that type of density would be detrimental to the city. But I could also see, instead of, approving new rental properties, moving more towards approving more high density owned properties to increase the property tax base, get a little bit more turnover as far as the money coming in, kind of lost my track there. The other thing that has been kind of a theme in some of these other discussions has also been that we need to continue to concentrate on the current residents of Mountain View and not so much focus on future residents. It's the people who live here now. They live here because of the quality of life. They purchased their homes, they rented their apartments, and we need to concentrate on that. And then, with some reasonable growth to come.
choice between stagnation and aggravation. Dan?
So I think the other thing is, like, as far as zoning changes, I think people don't like surprises. So it's really like, all of a sudden there's something, new in your neighborhood. That's not necessarily a good thing. What I'd rather see is, maybe, fewer restrictions on types of zoning, so to offer more flexibility to people, because I know there's this grand boulevard plan on El Camino, and the idea is to sort of revisit these tiny little one-story retail shops and potentially build more sort of Santana Row-ish kind of mixed retail and mixed housing. So it seems like there's room for that kind of stuff to happen. But I think the big one is to make sure that if someone's living in some property at some point in time, you don't just pull the rug out from under them and hey, all of a sudden you're zoned something different, and you can't do the things that you were doing.
But how do you prevent that? How can you possibly prevent that?
Well, I mean, so you could certainly, grandfather someone in if that's the case, or you can, really consider the valuation of making that kind of change. I mean, there's cost benefits to everything, and I mean, certainly you have to see, is this really that critical to, upset someone's livelihood like that?
Let me chime in on the growth limits. So I don't think one plans cities by the numbers. I can't say 75,343 is it. That's the right number. You plan a city by the vision that the residents have of the city. That's why we did the visioning process for the general plan update. We had hundreds of residents, we had business owners, we had people participating in 4 languages. We had a lot of input. And there was a fairly consistent picture of a city that has a vibrant downtown, that has very beloved neighborhoods, that has a lot of diversity, that is welcoming, and that is walkable, and that is green. And a city that is diverse and welcoming and green is not a city that says, you may not come in here.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it at that. For the moment, we're going to be back with more on our KMVT coverage of the candidates' council debate, or the council candidates debate, or one of the possible permutations of those words. I'm Seth Shostak. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Unlike commercial or public TV stations, we at KMVT Community Television focus on Silicon Valley residents, organizations, and businesses. We televise to over 100,000 viewers in Santa Clara County, with syndication potential to more than 1 million in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. We at KMVT connect Silicon Valley communities, empower people, and affect change. Do you?
Susan, I love you.
Oh, Kent, I love you too.
I want to be with you forever.
Oh, I feel the same way.
And because I love you so much,
oh, Kent,
I want you to have this.
Oh. Huh?
Promise me you'll register it on alertscc.com right away.
Oh, okay.
If you live or work in Santa Clara County, sign up at alertscc.com. In an emergency, you'll get life-saving information on the device of your choice. It's free, easy, and confidential. Sign up now.
I'm speechless.
Nice, huh?
I'm Billy Atwood with The Better Part, and I'm also a socks collector, and I have about 1,000 socks, and I have to determine what socks I want to wear for our 1,000th show celebration coming up in October. Sponge Pants Bob, this, the individual little toes, Christmas, Easter. Oh, how am I ever going to figure this out? Look at that. Just like going down the chimney. Oh, here it says Rock Goddess, the eagle. 1,000 socks. I just can't decide what socks I'm going to wear. But starting the week of October the 25th, when our 1,000th show is going to be showing, I hope all of you will be watching and find out what socks I have finally decided to wear.
Welcome back to the KMVT City Council Candidates Debate. I'm Seth Shostak, and we're going to get back to our 5 candidates of the 6 that are running for City Council. 3 slots, November 2nd. Roughly half of these people will be in office, and the others will be doing whatever they're going to be doing. Let's talk about the economy, because after all, it's the economy, stupid. The economy's uncertain. Many residents are not happy with the constant stream of fee increases, additional taxes. Many of the propositions on the ballot, these measures, the local measures, involve additional taxes for additional services and so forth. What are you all going to do to address these concerns, especially in regard to residents' frustrations with, and this forms, it seems, half the letters to the editor in the San Jose Mercury News, their frustration with high government salaries, government retirement benefits, and so forth. What are you going to do? Going to do anything? Yes, Dan.
So, obviously, I think everybody heard about, Bell, California, and now it sounds like there's a lot more, attention going on to.
They're not paid quite that highly here in Mountain View.
Exactly right. But, nonetheless, I mean, you look at the salary and the package for the average public safety worker, that's $190,000 a year. And these numbers have changed pretty dramatically over the last 10 years. The salaries for just the regular employees has gone up 60% over the last 10 years, and the cost of living has gone up 25%. So these people are certainly being paid quite a bit. In addition, there was $4.5 million of overtime last year went out to people. There's some people who made 89% of their salary again as overtime. So these things are really big. I think to address that, I think you really need to look into negotiation with the city employees. I mean, they've had 4.7 raises in the past, and I think for new employees, I think there needs to be another set of contracts for people coming on board. I think they also need to look into the pensions, because the pensions and the healthcare benefits are really wildly unfunded. So these things need to be addressed. I think the other issue is potentially can we find other people outside the city to do some of the work? Can we find third-party contractors to take care of tree trimming, or take care of our heating, ventilation, air conditioning needs? And I think just to look at much finer tooth at all the jobs in the city, and whether or not these jobs still make sense to be for city employees.
Maybe we could have somebody who's involved with this issue directly, or has been, comment on this. Sounds like sensible economies. Yeah, Jack?
I'll take it on. First of all, I don't know if you're aware, but we have approximately 100 fewer employees than we had 10 years ago. And I think that's good. I think that when you made it sound like the average fireman makes $190,000 a year. They don't. The average fireman makes much less than that.
Well, that was their package.
I know, but you made it sound like they're
but the
making
city still pays it. I mean, really, it's the $190,000 less than the city has.
And what does the private sector have for the same amount with the benefits? I don't know. So let me finish my statement, then you can certainly come back.
Sure.
But I believe that we do need to look at the pensions. I do agree with you on what you're referring to referred to as a 2-tier system, and that means that new employees coming in may not receive the same benefits as those that are already here, because it's not sustainable. We can't keep paying these salaries. We know that. We have new contracts coming up. Every employee in the city of Mountain View, with the exception of 3, are in a union, and we have contracts with them. All of those contracts are coming up for renegotiation over the next 2 years. I've negotiated many labor contracts. I really look forward to negotiating these contracts, and I think we can do better. I don't know exactly what that means at this time, but I know we can do better. And so what you say, you have to look at the history. We didn't get here overnight, and many of us inherited this, and we're not going to get rid of it overnight, but we sure are going to push in that direction. So,
did you want to address what Dan said about maybe outsourcing some of this?
Yeah, and certainly when you talk about outsourcing, we have tried outsourcing on a number of things. For example, IT, which is right up your alley, used to be outsourced. We had more problems with it. And we found out that we would get different people every day coming into our building to try to maintain our computers and our software, and we couldn't hold it, and it was actually costing us more. We did an analysis, and we're actually spending less on keeping our computer systems, which is integral to our city, for our water billing, for all the other kinds of things that we do, and we found out that it was actually less. Now that doesn't mean it's that way in every situation. So I think we can look at it on an individual basis and see clearly if there are areas that we can outsource. In any area it should be analyzed, but it needs to, people of the city of Mountain View enjoy the quality of service that they get, and they want it, and I want to keep giving it to them. And we're doing it with a sustainable, balanced budget. What that means is that we are not taking reserves to fund what we pay for every year. That would be like taking your savings from your IRA or from your savings account to pay your mortgage or pay for your car. It's not going to last very long. We are not doing that in Mountain View. The revenue that comes in is what we're spending for that year, and we can do better. Maybe we can even get ahead of that curve and start cutting it down. We're certainly going to try to do that.
Can I just have a quick comment on that?
Sure.
I mean, the only thing is, I know you said sustainable city budget, and I'd have to disagree. I think you had a structurally balanced budget, but I think as far as sustainability, I mean, inside the budget itself, I mean, there's a line that says it's apparent that future revenue growth cannot keep pace with projected growth in expenditures. So whomever's writing the budget knows it is not sustainable. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is the year before, I believe there was actually money taken out of reserves to help balance the budget. And this year there were some one-time fee increases. There were some don't hire some people that were going to be hired, and deferring some compensation. I think that the big issue is, like, when I was at the budget meeting, people on council were very happy that nothing dramatic had to be done, and that really incensed me to the point where I had to stand up and say, this is the time for something dramatic. I mean, really, before really something hits the fan, I think you need to get in there and start examining everything and understanding like how to really make this problem, how to address this problem.
Yeah, Margaret.
I have to say that Mountain View has had a history of being responsible, and I credit our city manager and past councils for that. When we had the downturn 7 years ago, a lot of these issues were brought up then. And I can go down and let's talk about pension or healthcare costs. We actually are pretty well funded at about 70 to 75% of our future liability, and that's really good compared to other cities. And we continue to work on that. We build it into our budget. Our pensions, our employees pay into their pension plans. They share the costs. And very few cities do that, frankly. There are some cities where the employer still pays the employee costs. But it's the other way around here in Mountain View. And I believe that it's because of these reforms that have happened in the past, and will continue to do them into the future, but do it together with our employees and the community, that has kept us afloat. And we do have a structurally balanced budget. We've made cuts. We are running lean. We have 100 less people than we did 10 years ago. We have more people in Mountain View than our neighboring city to the north, and we have a third less employees in the city, and they perform and they provide top-notch services. Does the community, do the residents want to risk that? That is the question that I think the community would have to answer.
Do you get any indication from the residents that they do feel that there's a problem here? I mean, Dan has suggested that they view, government jobs, if you will, local government jobs is a wonderful perk where you can get, high salary, lots of benefits, and, overtime and all that. Do you hear that, or do you not hear that?
Well, I do hear that, but that's what's in the news every day. And we're not San Jose, frankly. We're Mountain View. We're a different city, and we've been dealing with these issues in a different way. There was a time during the .com boom when cities were having a hard time attracting people to work in city government. Again, on the VTA, if you look at history, there was a time when management went to the employee groups and asked to open contracts so that they can increase salaries to attract bus drivers and so forth. So, it's the economy, like you said, economy goes up and down. We try to keep up with it, adjust it accordingly. I don't know how you can really compare. I mean, there might be some jobs that you can compare public sector with private sector, but frankly, who do you compare a policeman to? Why is $190,000 too much? How much do you think a policeman should make? I'd like to hear that, and I haven't heard those answers yet. I think we've done what we can. We're middle of the road when we do our salary surveys and negotiate. We're middle of the road
in comparison with other, for example,
other entities.
Right, but for example,
entities.
I'm looking at the grand jury document, and we have 190,000 for our police and fire, but Palo Alto pays 146.
But
and Los Altos pays 131.
That's just the you have to look at the total
No,
compensation
this is the package. This is wages and benefits.
Well,
that's what I'm looking at. These are the numbers submitted by your city, and these are the numbers submitted by every city. So it makes for really apples to apples comparison.
There's a lot of reports that are written, and they're very incomplete.
So you think that these cities offered inaccurate information?
I've seen different
and
numbers.
Mountain View is the only one who offered accurate information?
I've seen different numbers.
The numbers that we get are different.
But these are the numbers that are, in other words, these were the numbers that were provided by the city of Mountain View to the Santa Clara grand jury, and that's what I'm looking at.
It doesn't say what the number is.
I have
covers.
the document in front of me.
That's
it
great,
says wages and benefits.
It's taken out of context. You can't decide just by a number.
Well, I mean, what should be your response to the Santa Clara grand jury when they ask, "What are your wages and benefits for your public safety workers?" Do you make up a number? I mean, no. You give them your best number, and that's the exact same thing that every other city did. Apples to apples. It's the exact same comparison.
Okay, and let's go through the numbers. So then, does that cover the fact that 10%, actually for public safety, it's 17% now of that is put into their pension plan, whereas in Palo Alto it isn't? No, none of that is described in that. So you can't just look at the number and make those.
Right. Well, I mean, but
they're
still. I mean, the pensions and healthcare are unfunded, and the other problem with healthcare is it's growing at 15% a year.
Funded.
For the last 8 years, healthcare keeps growing.
Funded. It's pretty good.
Okay. Well, let's see if any of the others want to weigh in on this. I'm sort of getting you all have sort of well defined your positions, Ronit.
So one thing to keep in mind is that the city has a stellar credit rating, and that hasn't changed. And one of the reasons that the city has such a stellar credit rating is that our budgets are always extremely conservative. There is always an expectation that the revenue will be lower and that the expenses will be higher. And at the end of the year, consistently, it turns out that the revenues are higher and the expenses lower, which is why last year we did not actually have to dip into reserves. We actually came up. We finished the year with some extra money, although we had said that if it happens for a year that we have to dip into reserves, we have rainy day funds, and I truly hope that we do not have to live through another meltdown of the economy the way we did. Mountain View has for years actually looked at all the liabilities long before that was a requirement. Mountain View has looked at all the liabilities and worked them into its budget. The way the various cities present their benefits is so different from city to city. You sit down at these labor negotiations, and the numbers so do not compare the way they should because of the result of years of negotiations that have added layer above layer above layer of complexity, that finding exactly what each city funds, how much the employees contribute or not contribute in most cases, but not in Mountain View's case. There is no apples to apples. And if you had sat in on those meetings more than once or twice, you would have seen that the complexity is truly incredible. What we must do as a city is compare ourselves to other cities because, our residents expect the highest levels of service, and our residents get the highest level of service. But if you say, we don't really... cities, part of the story of Bell started with neighboring cities basically firing their staff and saying, we will use Bell staff. I bet that the kind of service that residents get when everyone is a contractor is not the same level of service of if you have a dedicated staff whose life and whose career are built in that city, and for whom the performance of their functions is part of their definition of self. This is what we have.
You mentioned in comparison with other cities, and of course we've heard that several times. Maybe I could ask, maybe this is the way to get to the point that Dan is making here or suggesting, do you find that, for example, police and firemen in Palo Alto are eagerly knocking on the doors of Mountain View to get a job here because it sounds like it's 20% better for them financially? No. Okay.
Well, and
Greg, you haven't weighed in on this. Let me give you a quick chance.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I think that we could spend all evening comparing numbers between cities and comparing salaries and where do we benchmark these? What do we benchmark to private industry or other cities, and where do we sit as far as other cities go? I think the important thing is that I do hear from residents, especially in our very vocal Old Mountain View Neighborhood Association, that they feel that our city workers are overpaid, that their pension plans are too generous, and that everybody needs to take a little bit of bite out of the sandwich that we're all eating right now with this poor economy. None of us has a silver bullet to fix this, but I think that we all agree that it does need to be looked at and need to make thoughtful analysis of the things. We need to look closely at the contracts when they're up for renegotiation. I don't think anybody's here wants to go in and slash and burn, because if you go in and do that, then you are going to have an exodus of employees. You're going to have a drop in services. It's just not the way you do it. But like I said, I think it really needs to have some very close attention. And because employee salaries are such a major portion of the budget, you just can't ignore that. There may be other places we can look for some savings, look for possibly some more revenue, but the big chunks are probably going to come out of that part of the budget.
It's not the tar and gravel to fill the potholes. It's the people.
But we have spent a lot of time on this, and we actually do spend hours on salaries and benefits, and I do believe that there is room for health care reform. The national reform isn't really doing much for us locally, and we do continue to look at this. We spent a whole year this past year balancing this budget, and it's not some easy feat. A feat that
I'm not belittling
can do.
anything you've done.
Well, I sometimes I wonder because. And we understand that there is the issue of sustainability, and we continue to look at it. But there is a lot more than just a number in a report, and that's the point that I guess I'd like to make, is that there are it's very complicated. You have to spend a lot of time. Going to one or two budget meetings really, frankly, doesn't do much for you. You have to really spend a lot of time, and we have, and we will continue to do so. I think I am very mindful that these are taxpayer dollars, and I think my colleagues feel the same way. So it's a challenge. It's difficult, and so I guess what I'm saying is that don't just look at one number and make a decision. Look at the whole story.
One last comment from Jack.
Normally, we don't start looking at the budget until January, February. Last year, we started looking at the budget July the 1st, immediately after the previous budget was passed. And we went through every single piece of everything with a fine-tooth comb, including, as many people know, Deer Hollow Farm, which I know many of us love. And fortunately, we saved it because everything was on the table. Nothing was sacred. We were looking at every single piece of everybody's budget, of every salary, anything. And I think we spent a full year and hundreds of hours. I don't know how many hours, I didn't count them, but hundreds of hours doing what you are talking about.
And to summarize, let me add a couple of sentences. We did spend a whole year on it, and the reason we spent a whole year was that we didn't want to make decisions in a vacuum. We wanted to have a clear strategy that would guide our decisions and make us arrive at the end at the structurally balanced budget, which very few cities have managed to do. We said that the pain would have to be shared, that the city would have to do some limit its expenditures, that the employees there would have to be cost containment in benefits and salaries, and there was about $1 million of that there would have to be some fees raised. So of the $4 million that we needed to disappear in order to have a balanced budget, we took $1 million here, $1 million there, and the pain was shared. Yes, we were very, very happy not to have to fire dozens of employees. Absolutely. I am in no way ashamed to have been relieved not to have to do that. You know, but we ended up without going into reserves.
And there's room for improvement. We will continue.
Sure, and
All right. Well, I tell you what. There's also room for some other questions. Obviously, a hot button issue here and an important issue.